The coffee smelled wrong. Not spoiled. Lauren Chen had worked in enough corporate offices to know the difference between burnt and rancid, but wrong in a way that made her fingertips tingle against the ceramic mug. Too sweet. Someone had used the hazelnut creamer, the one that HR had discontinued 3 years ago after the supplier went bankrupt. She remembered the memo. She'd written the memo. Her hand trembled, and a drop of the too sweet coffee splashed onto her wrist. The burn was immediate, sharp, but she didn't move. Couldn't move. Because across the open plan office, past the rows of standing desks and the sad, succulent garden that marketing maintained with religious inconsistency, sat Vanessa Park. Vanessa Park, who was supposed to be dead. Not literally dead. Lauren caught herself, pressing her palm flat against the desk's cool laminate surface. Vanessa wasn't dead. Vanessa had moved to Singapore, senior director of strategic partnerships at some fintech startup that had probably folded by now, or maybe thrived. Lauren had stopped checking after the first year, after the anger had calcified into something harder and less interesting than rage. But here was Vanessa, very much alive and very much here, leaning back in her ergonomic chair with that particular tilt of her head that meant she was about to ask someone for something. The fluorescent lights caught the edges of her bob. She still wore it in that sharp, asymmetrical cut that had been trendy 5 years ago, would be trendy again in 2 years, was somehow always exactly appropriate for Vanessa Park. Lauren's phone buzzed. The vibration rattled against the desk, and she looked down at the screen through eyes that felt like they belonged to someone else. Calendar reminder. 1 with David. Quarterly review date, March 15th, 2019. The numbers didn't make sense. She stared at them, waiting for them to rearrange themselves into something reasonable. 2024 maybe, 2025, but they stayed stubbornly, impossibly locked in place. March 15th, 2019. She'd lived this day before. The keyboard under her fingers was the old model, the one they'd replaced during the office renovation. The keys had more resistance than she remembered, required actual pressure instead of the whisper-soft touch of the newer versions. Her index finger found the small divot in the J key, worn down by someone else's habits in this keyboard's previous life. Someone laughed. Marcus, 2 desks over, at something on his screen. Marcus said who would quit in 8 months to start a podcast about cryptocurrency that would make him briefly, stupidly wealthy before the crash. Marcus, who was currently dating someone from accounting whose name Lauren had forgotten, if she'd ever known it. Marcus, who had no idea that in 5 years he'd be managing a pet grooming franchise in Portland and claim it was the best decision he'd ever made. How did she know that? Lauren. The voice cut through the cotton wool sensation in her head. Vanessa stood beside her desk now, close enough that Lauren could smell her perfume. Joe Malone, wood sage, and sea salt. Vanessa wore it every day, claimed it was her signature scent, would eventually switch to something by Le Labo when she decided the Joe Malone was too accessible, too frequently duplicated by the women in middle management. Lauren looked up. Vanessa's smile was perfect. Not too wide, professionally warm, the smile of someone who had read the same books on workplace relationships that Lauren had. Lean in. Nice girls don't get the corner office. All those books that promised you could succeed without compromising your integrity, right up until you couldn't. Do you have a second? Vanessa asked. I wanted to run something by you. This was the moment. Lauren knew this moment. She'd lived it before, had said yes without hesitation because that's what you did when a colleague asked for help, because she'd believed in lifting other women up, because she hadn't yet learned that some people viewed kindness as a weakness to exploit. Sure, Lauren heard herself say. The word came out steady, unremarkable. What's up? Vanessa perched on the edge of Lauren's desk, sunny, one hip angled just so, a posture that suggested casualness while maintaining complete control of the space. So I'm applying for this amazing opportunity, Director of Partnerships at Chen & Associates. You mean Wang and Associates? Lauren interrupted. Vanessa blinked. What? The firm? It's Wang and Associates, not Chen. Lauren's voice remained level, but something cold was spreading through her chest. She knew this because she'd helped Vanessa prepare for the interview. Had spent 3 evenings coaching her on the company's culture, their client roster, the managing partner's Harvard Business School thesis on strategic alliance management. Had done it because Vanessa had seemed so grateful, so genuinely appreciative of the help. Had done it because she'd been stupid. Right, of course. Ni, Wong and Associates. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recalculation. Anyway, they're asking for professional references, and I was hoping. She paused, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture that was supposed to seem nervous, but was actually perfectly choreographed. Would you be willing to be one of my references? The office hummed around them. Someone's desk phone rang, 4 sharp chirps before clicking to voicemail. The ventilation system whispered its eternal white noise. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, March rain streaked down the glass, turning the city beyond into something watercolor and indistinct. Lauren looked at Vanessa Park, at her earnest expression, her carefully chosen outfit. Theory blazer, equipment blouse, something expensive happening with her shoes that Lauren couldn't quite see from this angle, her whole manufactured authenticity, and felt something click into place. She'd said yes last time, had written a glowing reference, had emphasized Vanessa's collaborative nature, her strategic thinking, her ability to build relationships across organizational boundaries. Every word had been true, in the moment. Every word had been a weapon Vanessa would later use to cut Lauren out of projects, marginalize her contributions, position herself as the sole architect of initiatives they'd built together. Vanessa got the job. Wong and Associates became her launchpad. Within 2 years, she'd leveraged those connections into the Singapore position, leaving Lauren behind to clean up the half-finished projects and damaged relationships. But that was then. Or rather, that was later, or, Lauren? Vanessa's voice had an edge now, barely perceptible. You okay? You seem distracted. Just thinking, Lauren said. The coffee had gone cold in her hand, but she took a sip anyway, tasting the wrong sweetness of a creamer that shouldn't exist. About your question? And? Vanessa's smile was expectant, confident. She already knew the answer. Of course she knew the answer. Lauren always said yes. Except Lauren had lived this before, had lived all of it. The yeses that became nooses, the kindness that became exploitation, the years of watching Vanessa climb while using Lauren's back as a stepladder. Had lived it and died. No, not died. That wasn't quite right. Had lived it and learned. And now, impossibly, she was here again. March 15th, 2019. The day Vanessa Park asked to use her as a reference. The day everything started. Lauren set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. Yes, she said, I'd be happy to be a reference for you. Vanessa's face lit up with genuine pleasure, or a simulation so perfect it didn't matter. Really? Oh my God, Lauren, thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to me. I really want this position, and having someone like you vouch for me, someone with your reputation, your integrity, it's going to make all the difference. I'm sure it will, Lauren said. Each word felt weighted, significant in ways Vanessa couldn't begin to understand. Do you need me to provide contact information to them, or will they reach out to me directly? I'll give them your work email and phone number, if that's okay. They usually send a questionnaire, or sometimes they just call. Is there a better time to reach you? Any time is fine. Lauren pulled her keyboard closer, fingers hovering over the keys. Actually, who else are you listing as references? Just so I have context if they ask about your work relationships. Vanessa shifted her weight, and for the first time, something genuine crossed her face. Uncertainty. Well, I was going to ask David, obviously, and maybe someone from the Morrison Project. I was thinking Claire, but I'm not sure if... Claire's great, Lauren said. You should definitely ask her. She watched Vanessa process this, saw the moment of hesitation. Claire Martinez, who managed the Morrison account with ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for bullshit. Claire, who had seen through Vanessa's performance from day one, but had never bothered to say anything because corporate politics bored her. And anyway, she'd be leaving for a VP position at a competitor within the year. Claire, who would tell anyone who asked exactly what kind of colleague Vanessa Park really was. You think so? Vanessa asked. We haven't worked together that much. You worked together on the Morrison deliverables for 3 months, Lauren said. This was true. This had happened. That's substantial. And Claire knows everyone at Wang and Associates. Her former boss is their COO. That connection alone would be valuable for you. She could see Vanessa's mind working, weighing the potential risk against the potential gain. The calculation was almost visible, numbers scrolling behind her eyes. A reference from Claire Martinez? With her connections and her reputation, could be the difference between a good application and an exceptional one. That's a really good point, Vanessa said slowly. I didn't realize Claire had that connection. Because you never bothered to learn anything about people unless it directly benefited you, Lauren thought but didn't say. Instead, she smiled. You should also consider asking James Lynn from Product. Now Vanessa looked genuinely confused. James? We barely know each other. You worked on the vendor integration last fall, Lauren said. Remember, you presented the findings to the executive team? What she didn't say, you presented the findings that James compiled. You put your name on his analysis, showed up to the meeting with his slides, took credit for his work while he was out on paternity leave. James knew. James had been quietly, professionally furious. James would be delighted to serve as a reference for Vanessa Park. I guess I could ask him, Vanessa said. But wouldn't that be weird? We're not exactly close. Professional references don't have to be close friends, Lauren said. They just need to be able to speak to your work ethic and capabilities. And James saw you handle a complex project under tight deadlines. That's exactly the kind of thing Wang and Associates would want to hear about. The lie was so smooth it barely felt like lying. James had seen her handle a complex project, technically. He'd watched her steal it. Vanessa's uncertainty was hardening into decision. Lauren could see it happening, the way Vanessa's posture shifted, her smile returning to full wattage. You know what? You're absolutely right. Well, I'm going to ask both of them. God, Lauren, this is why I came to you. You always know exactly what to do. Happy to help, Lauren said. And she was. She really, truly was. Because in her first life, her previous life, her original life, the life she'd somehow already lived, she'd given Vanessa a glowing reference, had spent 20 minutes on the phone with Wang and Associates' hiring manager, emphasizing Vanessa's strengths, carefully not mentioning her weaknesses because that felt disloyal. Because what kind of person sabotaged a colleague's career? This time, she was going to do exactly the same thing. She was going to be honest. The office emptied slowly after 6, people trickling out in ones and twos, calling goodbyes that echoed against the high ceilings. Lauren stayed at her desk. They're watching the sky beyond the windows fade from gray to darker gray to the particular blackness of a city that never quite achieved true dark. The rain had stopped, leaving the glass streaked with the ghosts of water. Her computer screen glowed, the cursor blinking in the middle of an email she'd written and deleted 3 times. To Claire.Martinez@company.com. Subject, quick question no, too vague. To Claire.Martinez@company.com. Subject, Vanessa Park, too obvious. To Claire.Martinez@company.com. Subject, coffee tomorrow. She stared at the words. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. This was insane. All of this was insane. You didn't just wake up 5 years in the past. You didn't get do-overs on your life like it was a game save you could reload. That wasn't how reality worked. Except she could still taste the too sweet coffee, could still feel the resistance of the old keyboard, could still see Vanessa Park, young and ambitious and not yet successful, asking for help with that perfect smile. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Did you remember to call your grandmother? She's been asking about you. Lauren's grandmother had died in 2021. She'd been too sick to travel by then, and Lauren had been too busy, always too busy to visit. The funeral had been small, on Zoom, horribly impersonal. Lauren had spent the service staring at a frozen screen, her grandmother's face pixelated and unmoving, and felt nothing but a vast, echoing guilt. But apparently, in March 2019, her grandmother was alive. Her hands were shaking now. She pressed them flat against the desk, feeling the cool laminate, the realness of it. This wasn't a dream. Dreams didn't have this kind of granular detail. Didn't include the specific hum of the ventilation system, or the distant sound of a street sweeper outside, or the way the desk chair's left armrest had a hairline crack that would eventually split completely, requiring a facilities request and a 2-week wait for replacement. She knew these things because she'd lived them. Focus, she told herself. Deal with the immediate problem. Vanessa Park had asked for references. In the original timeline, God, was she really thinking in terms of timelines now? Lauren had said yes, had provided a glowing recommendation, had helped Vanessa secure the position that became her career springboard. This time, she'd also said yes. But this time, she'd suggested 3 additional references. people who would tell the truth, people who had no reason to protect Vanessa, who had their own quiet grievances, their own carefully filed memories of being used and discarded. Claire Martinez, who valued honesty above politeness. James Lynn, whose work Vanessa had stolen. And tomorrow, she'd add one more name to the list. Someone Vanessa would never think to question. Lauren pulled up her email and started typing. To Claire.Martinez@company.com. Subject, coffee tomorrow? Claire, I know this is random, but I wanted to catch up. Are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? I'm buying. Best, Lauren. She hit send before she could overthink it, then opened a new message. To James.Lynn@company.com. Subject, quick work question, James. Hope you and the baby are doing well. When you're back from paternity leave, I wanted to pick your brain about the vendor integration project from last fall. I'm working on something similar and thought your insights might be helpful. Let me know when you have time. Lauren, 2 more sent. The cursor blinked at her from a blank screen. Waiting. She pulled up her personal email and scrolled back through years of messages, looking for a specific name. It took longer than it should have. Apparently, her organizational system in 2019 was even worse than she remembered. But finally, there it was. From David.Morrison@company.com. Subject, Q2 planning. David Morrison, her boss, the man who would, in the original timeline, provide Vanessa with a reference so glowing it bordered on poetry. The man who had genuinely believed in Vanessa's potential, who had mentored her, to who had been blindsided when she left for Singapore and took half his strategic initiative plans with her. David, who had never quite looked at Lauren the same way after that, who had started viewing her as Vanessa's inferior replacement, who had eventually managed her out of the company with a generous severance package and a reference letter that damned her with faint praise. She opened a new message. To David.Morrison@company.com. Subject, Vanessa's application. Her fingers paused. What could she say? Hey boss, just wanted to let you know that the employee you're about to recommend is going to betray you. That Vanessa Park would use his mentorship as a resume bullet point while privately calling him old-fashioned and risk-averse to anyone who would listen. She deleted the subject line and started again. To David.Morrison@company.com. Subject, tomorrow's one. One David, looking forward to our quarterly review tomorrow. I've pulled together the metrics you requested, plus some additional analysis I think you'll find interesting. See you at 2? Lauren, not manipulation, just preparation. She'd go into that meeting ready to demonstrate her value, her strategic thinking, her attention to detail. She'd remind David why he'd hired her in the first place before Vanessa's star had started to rise and eclipse everyone else in the department. The office was fully dark now, just the emergency exit signs and the glow from her screen. Security would do their rounds soon, and she'd have to leave or explain why she was still here. But she sat for another moment, staring at her sent messages, feeling the weight of what she'd just done. She'd set a trap. No, that wasn't quite right. A trap implied deception. What she'd done was create the conditions for truth. When Wong and Associates called her references, they would call Claire and James and David. And those 3 people would tell them exactly what kind of colleague Vanessa Park was. Not lies. Not sabotage. Just honesty. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her mother. Lauren, did you see my message? Lauren picked up the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her grandmother. Alive. Asking about her. She pulled up her contacts and scrolled to the G's. There it was. Grandma Chen. The last time she'd called this number, it had been disconnected, the voicemail replaced by a robotic voice informing her the number was no longer in service. She pressed call before she could stop herself. 1 ring, 2 rings. 3. Wei? The voice hit her like a physical thing, familiar and unfamiliar at once, thinner than she remembered, but undeniably her grandmother's, speaking Mandarin in that particular tone that meant she was in the middle of cooking and mildly annoyed at the interruption. Nai, Lauren said, and her voice cracked. It's Lauren. Aiya, Wen, your mother said you would call. I told her you're too busy, always working. But here you are. Her grandmother's tone shifted to pleasure, warm and uncomplicated. Are you eating well? You sound tired. I'm fine, Nai. What could she say? I just needed to hear your voice because you're dead in another timeline that may or may not have actually happened. I wanted to check in. The skeptical noise her grandmother made when she suspected something was being left unsaid. You never just called to check in. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. The world had rearranged itself, and Lauren was the only one who knew. "Just a weird day at work," she said finally. "Made me think about what matters. Yeah, work is not what matters. Family matters. Health matters. You need to—" "I know, Nai, I know." Lauren closed her eyes, pressing the phone against her ear. "Tell me what you're making for dinner." And her grandmother did, launching into a detailed description of the fish she'd bought at the market, and how the vendor had tried to overcharge her and how she'd argued him down to a fair price, because you had to stand up for yourself, couldn't let people take advantage. Her voice was steady, solid, real. Lauren listened, memorizing every word. Claire Martinez looked exactly the same as Lauren remembered, which shouldn't have been surprising. 5 years wasn't that long, and Claire had the kind of style that transcended trend. Sharp blazer, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a way that suggested she couldn't be bothered with anything more complicated. She raised an eyebrow when Lauren slid into the seat across from her at the coffee shop. "This better be good," Claire said. "I skipped my morning workout for this." "You hate morning workouts," Lauren said without thinking. Claire's eyebrow climbed higher. "How do you know that?" Because in 3 years, Claire would join Lauren's book club, an ill-fated attempt at work-life balance that would last exactly 2 meetings before everyone admitted they didn't have time to read. During that brief window, Lauren had learned that Claire considered exercise a necessary evil, so best postponed until absolutely unavoidable. But that hadn't happened yet. Wouldn't happen now, probably, given that the timeline had apparently splintered into something new. "Lucky guess," Lauren said. "You don't seem like the 6 a.m. spin class type." "Fair." Claire took a sip of her Americano. Always an Americano, black, no sugar. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Your email was mysteriously vague. The coffee shop hummed around them, filled with the morning rush of professionals grabbing caffeine before their commute. Someone had spilled something near the counter, and a barista was mopping it up with mechanical efficiency. The air smelled like espresso and burnt milk, and the specific kind of anxiety that came with being late for work. Lauren wrapped her hands around her latte, feeling the heat through the paper cup. "Vanessa Park is going to ask you to be a reference." Claire's expression didn't change. "Okay. For a position at Wang & Associates, Director of Partnerships." "Okay," Claire said again. Then after a pause, "Why are you telling me this?" This was the moment. The point where Lauren had to decide how much to reveal. How much Claire would believe. In the original timeline, had Claire even agreed to be Vanessa's reference? Lauren couldn't remember. That detail had been lost in the general chaos of watching Vanessa ascend while she stagnated. "Because I told her to ask you," Lauren said, "and I want you to know that when they call, you should tell them the truth." Claire set down her coffee with deliberate care. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that when Wang & Associates contacts you about Vanessa Park's application, you answer their questions honestly, talk about the Morrison Project. Talk about her work ethic, her collaboration style, her tendency to take credit for other people's contributions." "That's pretty specific." Claire's eyes were sharp now, assessing. "Why would I do that?" "Because it's the truth. The truth can be a career-limiting move in corporate America, Lauren. You know that." "I do," Lauren said, "but you're leaving anyway. You'll have the VP offer from Thompson Associates within 2 months. You don't need to protect relationships here." Claire went very still. "How do you know about Thompson?" Shit. Lauren had gotten careless, let too much slip. In the original timeline, Claire had kept that job search completely confidential until she gave her notice. No one had known she was looking, let alone how far along she was in the process. "I don't," Lauren said carefully, "but I know you. You're too good for this place, Claire. You're not going to stay in a manager position much longer, not when you could be running a department somewhere else. And if you're leaving anyway—" She let the implication hang. Claire studied her for a long moment. The coffee shop noise seemed to fade. Or maybe Lauren's hearing had just narrowed to the sound of her own pulse. This was a gamble. Claire didn't tolerate manipulation, didn't play political games. If she thought Lauren was trying to use her— "Vanessa screwed over James Lynn," Claire said finally, took his vendor analysis and presented it as her own work. "I saw the original files. Timestamps don't lie." Relief flooded through Lauren, making her fingers tingle. I know." "You know?" Claire's tone sharpened. "Did you say something? Report it." "No." The admission tasted like ash. In her first life, She'd known and said nothing because it wasn't her place, because she didn't want to get involved, because confrontation made her uncomfortable. All those reasonable excuses that added up to cowardice. Why not? Because I was a coward. Lauren met Claire's eyes steadily. But I'm not anymore. Claire leaned back, reassessing. This isn't about being a good colleague, is it? This is personal. Vanessa Park is very good at making things personal while pretending they're professional, Lauren said. She's going to get the Wang position. They'll love her in the interview. She's perfect in interviews. But she's going to burn every bridge on her way out. And she's going to use people like James and like me as stepping stones. So yes, it's personal, but it's also true. And if I give her a bad reference, what? You get some kind of revenge? No, Lauren said. If you give her an honest reference, Wang and Associates makes an informed decision. That's all. They can still hire her. They probably will hire her because her resume is excellent and she knows how to sell herself, but they'll know what they're getting. Claire drummed her fingers against the table, a rhythm that Lauren recognized from countless meetings where Claire was processing information, weighing options. You're different, she said finally. Since when do you play hardball? Since I lived through this once and learned that being nice gets you nowhere, Lauren thought. Since I watched Vanessa climb over me and didn't fight back because I thought the universe was somehow fair. Since I got a second chance and decided not to waste it. Since this morning, she said instead. Weird day. Clearly, Claire picked up her coffee, drained it. Fine, if Vanessa asks me to be a reference, I'll do it. And I'll be honest. But Lauren, she stood gathering her bag. Whatever game you're playing here, be careful. Corporate revenge has a way of backfiring. This isn't revenge, Lauren said. It's justice. In my experience, the difference is mostly semantic. Claire slung her bag over her shoulder. Good luck. You're going to need it. She left, and Lauren sat alone with her cooling latte, watching the morning commuters flow past the window. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. 30 minutes until 1 with David. She drained her coffee and headed back to the office. David Morrison's office was a shrine to corporate achievement. Framed awards lined one wall, arranged in chronological order from his early sales numbers to his promotion to VP. His desk was obsessively organized, everything at right angles, his keyboard and mouse aligned with geometric precision. The air smelled like the sandalwood diffuser he kept running, allegedly for clarity of thought. Lauren had always found the office intimidating. In her first life, she dreaded these quarterly reviews, had felt like she was constantly defending her value, justifying her existence in the department. David had never been overtly critical, but there was something in his manner, a kind of distant assessment, that made her feel perpetually on trial. Now, sitting across from him with her laptop open and her metrics displayed, she felt something different. Not confidence, exactly, but a kind of clarity. She knew how this conversation would go in the original timeline. She knew that David would praise her consistency, her reliability, her steady hand on projects. All words that sounded positive but actually meant, you're fine, but you're not exceptional. You're a solid B player in a company that rewards A's. She also knew that in 3 months, he'd give Vanessa the lead on the Chen Technologies account, the one that would make or break the quarter. Vanessa would close the deal, David would praise her innovation and boldness, and Lauren would fade further into the background. Not this time. So, David said, settling into his chair with the particular satisfaction of a man who liked order and schedules. Quarterly review. You sent me the metrics. I did. Lauren pulled up the presentation she'd rebuilt from memory, the one she'd created in her first life but improved with 5 years of hindsight. But I also put together some additional analysis. I've been tracking some patterns in our client acquisition that I think you'll find interesting. She clicked through to the first slide. David leaned forward, his expression shifting from polite interest to actual attention. This is our client retention rate over the past 3 years, segmented by acquisition channel. The graphs were color-coded, clear, professional. You'll notice that clients we bring in through direct outreach have a 23% higher retention rate than those from trade shows or digital marketing. I hadn't seen that breakdown before, David said slowly. That's because we usually aggregate the data. Lauren clicked to the next slide, her pulse steady. But when you separate it out, the pattern is clear. Direct outreach clients also have a 31% higher lifetime value and a faster sales cycle, which suggests we should be reallocating resources. She'd learned this analysis in 2022. During a training seminar she'd attended after Vanessa left. It had been a revelation then, a moment of understanding why some strategies worked better than others. Now, she was delivering it 3 years early, watching David's face as he absorbed the implications. "This is good work," he said. "Really good. Have you shared this with the team?" "Not yet. I wanted to validate my methodology with you first." She clicked through 3 more slides, each one building on the previous insight, each one demonstrating strategic thinking that went beyond her usual steady, reliable contributions. "But I think there's an opportunity here. If we shifted 30% of our trade show budget into a more targeted direct outreach program, we could see a significant ROI improvement." David was nodding now, his fingers steepled in front of his face, the gesture he made when he was genuinely engaged. What would this program look like? Lauren had the answer ready. She'd thought about this for years, had watched Vanessa implement a similar strategy in Singapore and take all the credit. Now, she laid it out. The target companies, the personalized approach, the metrics for success. She spoke clearly, confidently, with the conviction of someone who'd already seen it work. When she finished, David sat back. "I'm impressed, Lauren. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need more of in this department." He paused. "Why haven't you brought me this kind of analysis before?" "Because I didn't know it yet," she thought. "Because I was too busy being reliable and steady and all those other words that mean invisible." "I wanted to make sure I had something worth your time," she said instead. "This felt worth it." "It absolutely is." David made a note on his ever-present notepad. "I want you to develop this into a full proposal, presented at the senior staff meeting next month. This could be a game changer for Q2. In her first life, Vanessa had presented a similar proposal at that meeting. She'd gotten the green light, the budget, the accolades. She'd built her reputation as an innovator on the back of an idea that wasn't originally hers. History was being rewritten, one conversation at a time. "I'll have it ready," Lauren said. "Good." David checked his watch. "Anything else we need to cover?" "Actually, yes." Lauren pulled up her final slide. "Vanessa Park mentioned she's applying for a position at Wong & Associates. She asked me to be a reference." David's expression shifted. Pleasure, pride, a hint of possessiveness. Vanessa was his protege, his star employee. Of course he'd be happy to help her advance. "She asked me too," he said. "She's got a real future, that one. Wong would be lucky to have her." "They would," Lauren agreed. "Although I'm surprised she's looking to leave. She's done such good work here. Some people are meant for bigger things." David's tone suggested he didn't include Lauren in that category. "We'll miss her, of course, but I never want to hold someone back from the right opportunity." "Of course not." Lauren kept her expression neutral, professional. "I just wanted to mention it. I know the timing could impact team dynamics, especially with the Chen Technologies account coming up." "Chen Technologies?" David looked confused. "We're not pursuing them until Q3. "I thought I saw them on the prospect list for Q2, Lauren said, which was a lie, but a useful one. My mistake. She'd planted the seed. When the Chen Technologies opportunity came up in 6 weeks, David would remember this conversation, would remember that Lauren had been thinking ahead, anticipating strategic opportunities. Would remember that she'd been the one to flag it, not Vanessa. Small changes accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life. James Lynn's response to her email came at 11 p.m. Lauren was at home, supposed to be sleeping, instead lying in her bed staring at the ceiling of her apartment. The apartment looked wrong. Too small, too spare, decorated with the furniture she'd gotten rid of 3 years ago. Or would get rid of. The temporal confusion was giving her a headache. Her phone lit up with the notification. From james.lynn@company.com. Subject, quick work question, Lauren. Thanks for reaching out. Baby's great. Not sleeping, but great. I'm back next week and happy to chat about the vendor integration. Fair warning, I have some thoughts about how that project was handled. Coffee on Tuesday? James. She read the message 3 times, parsing the careful professionalism, the subtle edge in how that project was handled. James knew, of course he knew, but he'd never said anything official, never filed a complaint, never confronted Vanessa directly. Why would he? He was a mid-level product manager with a new baby and a mortgage. Vanessa was a rising star with connections and David's support. The power differential was impossible to overcome. Lauren typed a response. Tuesday works. 10 a.m. at Bluebird? His reply came immediately. See you there. She set her phone down and stared at the ceiling again. The light from the street filtered through her blinds, creating stripes across the white paint. In her first life, she'd lived in this apartment for 2 more years before moving to a better place in a better neighborhood. She'd celebrated that move. They had felt like she was finally making progress, building a life. Now she knew she'd left it because Vanessa's departure had created a promotion opportunity, one that had come with a salary bump and the kind of corporate language about growth potential that really meant you're a warm body filling a gap. She'd taken it gratefully, had never questioned whether she deserved better. Her phone buzzed again. Not James this time. A text from an unknown number. Hi, Lauren. This is Vanessa. Got your number from the directory. I talked to Claire today and she said yes to being a reference. You were so right about her having connections. Thank you so much for the suggestion. I also reached out to James. Fingers crossed, he says, yes, you're literally the best. Drinks on me when I get the job. Lauren stared at the emoji. The champagne bottle with its little celebration sparkles. So casual, so confident, so completely oblivious to what she'd just done. Because Vanessa had no idea who Claire Martinez really was. No idea that Claire had seen through her from day one, had watched her steal James's work, had made mental notes of every small dishonesty. Claire would say yes to being a reference, would be polite and professional on the phone with Wang and Associates, and would tell them everything they needed to know about Vanessa Park's character. James would do the same. David was more complicated, but David was also scrupulously honest, and if asked the right questions, he would give answers that revealed more than he intended. Lauren typed a response. So glad it worked out. Good luck with the application. Simple, supportive, absolutely true. She set her phone on her nightstand and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was Saturday. In her first life, she'd spent tomorrow cleaning her apartment and doing laundry and running errands, the usual weekend routine of someone whose social life consisted mainly of work, happy hours. But she had other plans now. Tomorrow she was going to visit her grandmother. The nursing home smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables, and something underneath both. A scent Lauren associated with institutions, with places where people went when their families couldn't or wouldn't care for them. Her grandmother wasn't in a nursing home yet, wouldn't be for another year. But Lauren remembered this smell. Remembered it viscerally, from the visits she'd put off, the calls she'd been too busy to return. Her grandmother lived in a small apartment in Chinatown, above a shop that sold medicinal herbs. The stairwell was narrow and steep, the walls painted a color somewhere between yellow and cream, marked with decades of scuffs and scratches. Lauren climbed slowly, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. She knocked, waited, heard shuffling footsteps, the sound of locks being undone. 3 of them, because you couldn't be too careful in the city. The door opened. Her grandmother looked younger than Lauren remembered. Not young, she was in her 80s, with the kind of age that showed in every line on her face, but more vital. Her eyes were brighter, her movements more certain. In 5 years, she would shuffle instead of walk, would need help with basic tasks, would fade gradually, then quickly, into absence. But here, now, she was alive. Fully, completely alive. When? Her grandmother's face split into a smile. You came. Your mother said you were too busy. I'm never too busy for you, Nai. Lauren stepped inside, and the apartment wrapped around her like a memory. The same furniture, the same photographs on the walls, the same jade plant in the window that would eventually die from overwatering. Everything achingly familiar and impossibly precious. Her grandmother was already moving toward the kitchen. You eat yet? I have leftover tang ku pai gu. I can heat it up. And soup? You look too thin. I'm not too thin. Lauren followed her, watching the way her grandmother moved through her small kitchen with complete confidence, pulling down bowls, ladling soup from a pot on the stove. This was her domain, her kingdom. And I ate breakfast. Breakfast. Her grandmother made a dismissive noise. Toast? Coffee? That's not breakfast. Sit. Lauren sat at the small table in the same chair she'd sat in during childhood visits. Her grandmother set a bowl of soup in front of her. Winter melon and pork, the broth clear and fragrant. Then a small plate of pickled vegetables. Then rice. Then the sweet and sour pork ribs, reheated and glistening. Nai, this is too much. Eat. Her grandmother sat down across from her, pouring tea into small cups. You never come visit, and when you do, you don't eat. What kind of granddaughter? The complaint was familiar, almost ritualistic. Lauren picked up her spoon and tasted the soup. It was perfect, exactly as she remembered, as she'd tried and failed to recreate in her own kitchen. Although some recipes couldn't be replicated, could only be learned by watching, by doing, by the kind of patient transmission that took years. Years she hadn't taken. This is delicious, she said, and her voice cracked. Her grandmother looked at her sharply. What's wrong? Nothing. How could she explain? I just really appreciate this. Appreciate you. Aya. Her grandmother waved a hand dismissively, but her eyes were soft. You're being strange. Did something happen at work? No, yes, maybe. Lauren took another spoonful of soup, buying time. I've just been thinking about priorities, about what matters. Work doesn't matter, her grandmother said firmly. I tell you this always, but you don't listen. Family matters. Health matters. Money, good to have. But money doesn't keep you warm at night. Doesn't visit you when you're old. I know. Lauren did know. She'd always known in the abstract. But knowing something intellectually and understanding it viscerally were different things. I'm sorry I don't visit more often. You're busy? Young people are always busy. Her grandmother sipped her tea. But even busy people can call their nai once a week, huh? I'll call, Lauren promised. Every week. I promise. Her grandmother studied her face, and Lauren had the uncomfortable sensation of being seen completely, of all her secrets and sorrows being visible in a way they never were with anyone else. Something did happen, her grandmother said. You can tell me. Could she? Could she explain that she'd lived through this life once before, had made mistakes she couldn't undo? So had lost her grandmother to time and distance and her own selfishness? Could she explain that she'd been given an impossible gift, a second chance, and was terrified of wasting it? I'm just trying to be better, Lauren said finally, to make better choices. Good. Her grandmother nodded approval. Better is good. Perfect is impossible. But better is always possible. They sat in comfortable silence, eating. Through the window, Lauren could see the narrow street below, the shop signs in Chinese and English, the constant flow of people. The city hummed with its eternal energy, indifferent to individual dramas, to second chances and regrets, and the small miracles of reconnection. Her grandmother's apartment was warm, fragrant, filled with the evidence of a life lived fully. Photographs of ancestors, plants somehow thriving in limited light, the accumulated objects of decades. Lauren tried to memorize it all, to imprint every detail in a way she hadn't bothered to do the first time. Nai, she said, will you teach me how to make this soup? Her grandmother looked surprised. You never wanted to learn before, always too busy, too modern. I want to learn now. Her grandmother stood moving toward the kitchen. Okay, come, I show you, but you have to pay attention. These things, you can't learn from recipe, you have to feel it. Lauren followed her grandmother into the kitchen, pulled out her phone to take notes, and began to learn. Monday morning arrived with the particular dread that came from knowing you'd set events in motion and couldn't control the outcome. Lauren arrived at the office early, made herself a coffee that tasted right this time. Apparently, someone had already bought new creamer, and settled at her desk to wait. Vanessa's application to Wong & Associates would have been submitted over the weekend. The HR department there was efficient. They'd start checking references by midweek, which meant Lauren had maybe 3 days before everything either fell apart or came together. 3 days to second-guess every decision. Her inbox dinged with a new message. From Claire.Martinez@company.com, subject, no subject. Vanessa asked me to be a reference. I said yes. Fair warning, I'm going to tell them exactly what I think of her collaborative approach. Also, you were right. Thompson made an offer. I'm giving notice next week. Don't make me regret this. See? Lauren read the message twice, then deleted it. Not out of paranoia. Corporate email was never truly private anyway, but out of a kind of instinctive caution. The fewer tracks she left, the better. Her phone buzzed. A reminder for her coffee with James tomorrow. She added a note to bring her tablet, to have her questions ready. James deserved the truth about why she'd asked him to be a reference, or at least as much truth as she could give without sounding completely insane. Morning, Lauren looked up. Vanessa stood beside her desk, bright-eyed and caffeinated, holding a Starbucks cup with her name spelled wrong on the side. Vanessa. It was a small thing, a stupid thing. But Lauren remembered that in her first life, Vanessa had collected these misspelled cups. She had posted them on social media with captions about the struggles of having a unique name, had turned even barista errors into personal branding. Morning, Lauren said. You're here early? Couldn't sleep. Vanessa perched on the edge of the desk, that same casual but controlled posture. I'm so nervous about the Wang application. I keep checking my email every 5 minutes like they're going to respond instantly. Which is ridiculous. I know they need time to review everything and check references, and I'm rambling. Sorry. She didn't sound sorry. She sounded excited, energized by her own anxiety in that way some people were. Vanessa thrived on high-stakes situations, on the adrenaline of performance and evaluation. It was one of her strengths, actually, the ability to convert pressure into motivation. When did you submit? Lauren asked. Saturday afternoon. So technically, they won't even see it until today. Vanessa took a sip of her coffee. But I wanted to thank you again for suggesting Claire and James. Claire already said yes, and I'm meeting James for lunch today to ask in person. Smart, Lauren said, because it was. Face-to-face requests were harder to refuse, created a sense of obligation that email couldn't match. Vanessa was good at this, at reading social dynamics, at knowing which levers to pull. If she'd been a better person, she would have been genuinely impressive. I'm trying. Vanessa's smile was self-deprecating, almost genuine. This job could be really important for me. For my career, Wang & Associates does exactly the kind of strategic partnership work I want to be doing, and their client roster is incredible. Plus, the managing partner studied under Professor Morrison at Harvard, so there's that connection. She kept talking, outlining her strategy, her vision, her 5-year plan. Lauren half listened, making appropriate noises at appropriate moments. This was Vanessa at her most authentic. When she was talking about her ambitions, her goals, her trajectory, everything else was performance. But this was real. It made what Lauren was doing both easier and harder. Easier, because Vanessa's self-absorption meant she'd never suspect that Lauren had any agenda beyond helping a colleague. Harder, because ambition itself wasn't a crime, and Lauren could remember being young and hungry and convinced that success was just a matter of working hard enough and wanting it badly enough. Anyway, Vanessa said, winding down, I just wanted to say thanks. Again, you've been incredibly supportive through all of this. Of course, Lauren said. Good luck with James. Vanessa left, and Lauren turned back to her computer. She pulled up the proposal she was developing for David, the one that would be presented at next month's senior staff meeting, the one that would establish her as strategic thinker, not just a reliable worker bee. But she couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept drifting to tomorrow's conversation with James, to the moment when Wang & Associates would call her references, to all the ways this could go wrong. What if Claire got cold feet? What if James decided loyalty to the company mattered more than honesty? What if David's reference was so glowing that it overwhelmed any concerns the other references raised? What if Lauren had set this all in motion and it changed nothing? Her phone rang, an internal number. She picked up. Lauren Chen? Lauren, it's David. Do you have a minute? I'd like to discuss your proposal. Of course. Should I come to your office? Actually, I'm heading to a meeting. Can you walk with me? This was new. In the first timeline, David had reviewed her proposal via email, had given perfunctory feedback, had scheduled the presentation without much discussion. The fact that he wanted to talk about it in person suggested actual interest. I'll meet you at the elevator, she said. David was already waiting when she arrived, holding his ever-present notepad and wearing the particular expression he got when he was working through a problem. They stepped into the elevator together, and he pressed the button for the executive floor. I've been thinking about your client retention analysis, he said without preamble, and I think you're on to something significant, but I want to push you on the execution. Okay, Lauren pulled out her phone, ready to take notes. What's your concern? The resource allocation piece. You're proposing we shift 30% of the trade show budget into direct outreach, but trade shows give us visibility, brand presence. How do we measure the value of that against direct client lifetime value? It was a good question, a smart question. And Lauren had an answer because she'd spent years thinking about this exact problem. We don't have to choose between visibility and conversion, she said. What if we maintained a presence at major trade shows but reduced our footprint at secondary ones? Focus on the top 3 events where our target clients actually attend, scale back on the rest. That gives us brand presence where it matters while freeing up budget for more targeted outreach. David nodded slowly. Which events would you prioritize? Lauren listed them, explaining the rationale for each one, citing attendance numbers and industry trends. The elevator reached the executive floor, but David didn't get out. He pressed the button for the lobby instead, extending their conversation. "This is good," he said. "Really good. I want you to refine this. Add the cost-benefit analysis, some case studies if you can find them. And I think we should present it earlier. Week after next instead of next month. Strike while the iron is hot." Week after next? Lauren's pulse jumped. That was fast. Faster than she'd planned for. Problem? No problem. I'll be ready. Good. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. David stepped out, then turned back. Lauren, I want to be clear about something. This is the kind of strategic thinking that leads to advancement in this company. Not just doing good work, but seeing around corners, identifying opportunities before they're obvious. Keep this up and we'll be having very different conversations about your role here. The doors closed before she could respond. Lauren leaned against the elevator wall, feeling the weight of what had just happened. In her first life, she'd been the steady one, the reliable one, the one who executed other people's visions. Vanessa had been the visionary, the one who thought strategically, the one David had invested in. Now those roles were reversing. The elevator chimed, arriving back at her floor. She stepped out, walked to her desk, and pulled up her proposal. Week after next. She could do it. She'd have to work nights and weekends, would have to sacrifice sleep and social life and the comfortable routines she'd settled into. But she'd done it before. She could do it again. Her phone buzzed. A text from her grandmother. "Did you write down the soup recipe? Don't forget the white pepper. Very important." Lauren smiled and typed back, "I wrote it down. Making it this weekend." Another buzz, this time from her mother. "Your grandmother says you visited. She's so happy. Thank you, when. Small changes accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life." Tuesday morning, Bluebird Coffee was packed with the usual crowd of professionals conducting the usual business of professional life. Lauren arrived early. I claimed a table in the back corner where conversations could be relatively private and ordered 2 Americanos. James liked Americanos. She remembered that from somewhere. Some happy hour or team lunch in the distant future that had already happened. The temporal confusion was getting worse, not better. James arrived exactly on time, looking exhausted in the way all new parents looked exhausted, the kind of tired that went bone deep and might never fully go away. But his smile was genuine when he spotted her. Lauren. He slid into the seat across from her, accepting the coffee with visible gratitude. "Thanks for this." "Thanks for making time." She pushed a packet of sugar across the table. He liked one sugar. She remembered that, too. "How's fatherhood treating you?" He paused, searching for words. "It's everything everyone said it would be, but nobody can actually prepare you for it. The love, the terror, the complete loss of control over your schedule. We're averaging maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, and those aren't consecutive hours." "Sounds brutal." "It is." He stirred sugar into his coffee. "But also kind of amazing. I know that sounds like a cliche, but I get it now. Why people do this. Why they say it's worth it." Lauren felt something twist in her chest. In her first life, she'd never had children. Had always planned to eventually when her career was more established, when she was more financially secure, when the timing was right. The timing had never been right. By the time she'd realized she actually wanted kids, she was in her late 30s and single and too afraid of the practical challenges to pursue it alone. Another regret. Another might have been. "I'm glad," she said, meaning it. "That it's amazing, I mean, despite the sleep deprivation. Ask me again in 6 months." He took a long drink of coffee. So you wanted to talk about the vendor integration project? Here it was, the moment to decide how much truth to tell. Actually, Lauren said slowly, I wanted to talk about Vanessa Park. James's expression went carefully neutral. Okay. She's going to ask you to be a reference for a job at Wang & Associates. She might have already asked. She asked. His tone gave nothing away. Yesterday. Lunch meeting, very professional, very grateful. She said you suggested it. I did. Why? Lauren wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth through the paper. The coffee shop noise swirled around them. Conversation, laughter, the hiss of the espresso machine, normal people having normal conversations about normal things. Because I want Wang & Associates to know exactly who they're hiring, she said. And I think you're one of the few people who will tell them the truth. The truth? James leaned back in his chair, studying her. Which would be what exactly? That she took credit for your work on the vendor integration, that she presented your analysis as her own, that she's very good at claiming other people's ideas while making it look collaborative. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. James's eyes had gone flat, his mouth a thin line. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. How do you know about that? I saw the file timestamps, Lauren lied. Well, half lied. She had seen them, just not in this timeline. Or I was pulling some data for a different project and noticed the discrepancy. Your initial analysis was dated 2 weeks before the presentation, and your name was in the original file metadata. And you didn't say anything. Not a question, an accusation. No, Lauren said. I didn't, because I was a coward, and I convinced myself it wasn't my place, and I didn't want to make waves. But I've been thinking about that choice a lot lately, and I regret it. So this is guilt? James's voice had an edge now. You're trying to make yourself feel better by weaponizing me? No. Lauren met his eyes steadily. This is honesty. You deserved credit for that work, and you didn't get it. If someone from Wang & Associates calls and asks about Vanessa's collaboration style, or her integrity, or her contribution to team projects, you have an opportunity to tell them what actually happened. That's all I'm suggesting. That's all, James laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? To potentially torpedo a colleague's career? To go on record criticizing someone who works in the same company, who has connections I don't have? Who could make my professional life very difficult if she wanted to? I do understand, Lauren said, which is why I'm not asking you to do anything except tell the truth. If they call, answer honestly. If they don't ask the right questions, you don't have to volunteer information. But if they ask about her integrity, about her collaboration, about her approach to team projects, don't lie to protect her. And if she finds out I gave her a bad reference? She won't, Lauren said. Reference checks are confidential, and even if she suspected, she couldn't prove anything. You'd just be one voice among several. James took another long drink of coffee, his expression unreadable. Why do you care so much about this? What did Vanessa do to you? Everything, Lauren thought. Stole my projects, marginalized my contributions, used my work to build her career while pushing me into irrelevance. Smiled while she did it, made it look so natural that I questioned whether I was being paranoid. She hasn't done anything to me, Lauren said, yet. But I've watched her operate, and I know what kind of colleague she is. And I think Wang & Associates deserves to make an informed decision. Informed. James set down his coffee cup. You keep using that word. But what you're really talking about is revenge. Is it revenge to tell the truth? It is when you're strategically deploying the truth to harm someone. Am I harming her, or am I preventing her from harming others? Lauren kept her voice level, reasonable. Vanessa is very good at her job in a lot of ways. She's charismatic, strategic, excellent in client-facing situations. Wang & Associates might hire her anyway, even knowing about the vendor integration situation. But they should get to make that choice with full information. James was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup like it held answers. Finally, he looked up. My wife and I talked about this last night, he said, about whether I should agree to be Vanessa's reference. Emma said I should decline, that nothing good comes from being involved in office politics. But I said yes anyway because saying no felt petty, felt like I was still bitter about something that happened months ago. You're not bitter, Lauren said. You're hurt. There's a difference. Is there? He rubbed his eyes, the gesture of someone running on too little sleep and too much stress. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, I think, but I need to be clear about something. If Wong and Associates calls me, I'll answer their questions honestly. I won't volunteer information they don't ask for, and I won't go out of my way to make Vanessa look bad. But I also won't lie to make her look better than she is. That's the best I can offer. That's all I'm asking for, Lauren said. Is it? James stood, gathering his things. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're orchestrating something. Like, you've got a plan. And I'm just one piece of it. And I don't love being a game piece, Lauren. He left before she could respond. Lauren sat alone at the table, her coffee cold now, watching the morning crowd ebb and flow. Her phone buzzed. A message from David asking for a status update on the proposal. Another from her grandmother with a photo of the soup she'd made, asking if Lauren's looked the same. Another from Vanessa, thanking her again for all her help, saying she had a good feeling about the application. Small changes, accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life. She just hoped she was rewriting it towards something better, not just different. The call came on Thursday afternoon. Lauren was deep in spreadsheet analysis, building out the cost-benefit model for her proposal. When her desk phone rang, she almost didn't answer. She was in that flow state where interruptions felt like violence. But something made her pick up. Lauren Chen. Miss Chen, this is Patricia Wong from Wang & Associates. I'm calling regarding Vanessa Park's application for our Director of Partnerships position. Do you have a few minutes to speak with me? Lauren's pulse jumped, but her voice stayed steady. Of course. I'm happy to help. Wonderful. Miss Park listed you as a professional reference, and I'd like to ask you a few questions about your working relationship with her. Sure. Lauren pulled up a blank document on her computer, fingers poised over the keyboard. She wanted a record of this, wanted to remember exactly what she said. How long have you worked with Miss Park? About 2 years. We're both in the Strategic Partnerships department. And what's the nature of your working relationship? We're colleagues. We've collaborated on several projects and support each other's work. All true. All technically true. Can you speak to Miss Park's collaboration style? Here it was. The question that mattered. Lauren took a breath. Vanessa is very effective at driving projects forward and presenting results. She's charismatic in client meetings and skilled at building relationships with external stakeholders. That's helpful. And what about her work with internal teams? How does she collaborate with colleagues? The question was slightly different from the first one. Patricia Wong was good at this, at asking questions that seemed similar but actually probed different angles. Vanessa is focused on outcomes, Lauren said carefully. She's very goal-oriented, which can be an asset. She knows how to position work in the best possible light. I see. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Can you give me an example of a project you've worked on together? We collaborated on the Morrison account analysis. Vanessa presented the findings to the executive team. And what was your role in that project? I provided data analysis and worked with other team members to compile the research. Also true. She'd done those things. She'd also developed the strategic framework that Vanessa had presented as her own insight, but that wasn't what Patricia had asked. How would you characterize Miss Park's integrity in professional settings? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. This was it. This was the moment where Lauren could say something damning, could plant seeds of doubt that might grow into rejection, or she could deflect, give another technically true but ultimately meaningless answer. Vanessa is very ambitious, Lauren said slowly. She's focused on her career advancement and makes decisions accordingly. I think she genuinely believes in the value of the work she does. But would you describe her as someone with strong professional integrity? I think Vanessa has a different definition of collaboration than some people do, Lauren said. She's excellent at synthesizing information and presenting it effectively. Whether that always includes appropriate attribution, I think that's a question others might be better positioned to answer. More typing? A longer pause. Miss Chen, I appreciate your candor. Well, one final question. If you were in a position to hire someone for a role that required both strong client-facing skills and the ability to work effectively with internal teams, would you hire Miss Park? The trap question. The one that would reveal Lauren's actual recommendation beyond the careful diplomatic language. I think that depends on the role, Lauren said. For a position that's primarily external-facing, where client relationships are the key metric, Vanessa would be excellent for a role that requires deep collaboration with internal stakeholders and shared credit on team projects. She paused. I think you should speak with her other references about that. I see. Thank you, Miss Chen. This has been very helpful. Of course. And Miss Wong. Wong and Associates is a good firm. I hope you find the right person for the position. Thank you. We appreciate your time. The call ended. Lauren set down the phone and stared at the document on her screen, at the transcript she'd typed in real time. She read it through twice, analyzing every word choice, every implication. She hadn't lied, hadn't said anything overtly negative, hadn't sabotaged Vanessa's application in any obvious way. But she also hadn't given her a glowing recommendation, had raised questions, had suggested that Patricia Wong should speak with other references who Lauren knew would be less diplomatic. Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Got a call from Wang. Told them exactly what I think about Vanessa's team player approach. Hope that's what you wanted. Another buzz seconds later from an unknown number. This is James. They called. I answered honestly. I hope you know what you're doing. Lauren stared at the messages. What was she doing? Seeking justice? Seeking revenge? Was there really a difference? Or was that just semantic gymnastics to make herself feel better about interfering in someone else's career? Her desk phone rang again. Internal number. She picked up. Lauren, it's Vanessa. Do you have a second? Sure. Did Wong and Associates call you? For my reference? They did. This afternoon. And? How did it go? Vanessa's voice was bright with anxiety, with hope. What did they ask about? The usual questions. Collaboration style, work ethic, specific projects. Pretty standard reference check. But you gave me a good reference, right? I mean, you said yes to being a reference? Oh, so obviously you think I'd be good for the role. Lauren chose her words carefully. I told them about your strengths, your client-facing skills, your ability to drive projects forward, your presentation abilities. I was honest about what you bring to the table. Honest? The word came out slightly flat. What does that mean? It means I answered their questions truthfully. Lauren kept her voice neutral, professional. That's what references are supposed to do. Right, of course. There was a pause, and Lauren could almost hear Vanessa's mind working, trying to decode the subtext. Did they seem positive about my application? They were professional. They're checking references, which means you're still in consideration. That's a good sign. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Vanessa's voice regained some of its usual confidence. I'm probably just overthinking it. Thanks, Lauren. I really appreciate you doing this. No problem. Good luck. Lauren hung up and turned back to her computer. The proposal document stared back at her, half-finished, waiting. She had 3 days until the presentation. 3 days to build a case for her own strategic value, her own vision, her own indispensability. 3 days to prove that she deserved to be more than Vanessa Park's understudy. She pulled up the cost-benefit analysis and started typing. The weekend passed in a blur of work. Lauren spent Saturday in the office, refining her proposal, building out the case studies, rehearsing her presentation. She spent Sunday at her grandmother's apartment, learning how to make hong shao ryu, braised pork belly, while her grandmother criticized her knife skills and told stories about Lauren's grandfather, who had died before Lauren was born. He would have liked you, her grandmother said, watching Lauren struggle to cut the pork into even pieces. He liked people who tried hard, even when they weren't naturally good at things. He said effort was more important than talent. Was he right? Lauren asked. Sometimes. Her grandmother took the knife from her, demonstrating the proper angle, the right amount of pressure. But talent makes effort easier. Here, like this, see? Lauren watched, memorized, tried again. Her pieces were still uneven, but better. Good, her grandmother said. You learn. That's the important thing. They cooked together in comfortable silence, the kitchen filling with the rich smell of pork and soy sauce and star anise. Through the window, the afternoon light slanted across the rooftops of Chinatown, golden and ephemeral. Lauren tried to fix the moment in her memory, her grandmother's hands moving with practiced confidence, the steam rising from the pot, the sense of being connected to something larger than herself. Nai, she said. Do you ever think about choices you made? Wonder if you should have done things differently? Her grandmother stirred the pot, considering. Everyone thinks that, but thinking too much about the past is like trying to unring a bell. Can't be done. Better to focus on what you can change. What if you could change the past? Would you? Oh yeah, what kind of question is that? Her grandmother tapped the spoon against the pot's rim. The past is the past. It made you who you are. You want to be someone different? I want to be better. Better is good. Different is hard to judge. Her grandmother lifted the lid, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam. You know what your grandfather used to say? He said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You understand? Lauren nodded slowly. I think so. Good. Now taste this. Tell me if it needs more soy sauce. Monday arrived with the particular dread that came from knowing you had to perform. Lauren's presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the executive conference room with David and 3 VPs in attendance. She'd rehearsed it a dozen times, knew every slide, every data point, every potential question. But knowing and performing were different things. She arrived at the office early. He made her ritual coffee, reviewed her slides one more time. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. She'd done this before. Well, not this exactly, but similar things. Presentations, high-stakes meetings, professional performances where your career hung in the balance. She could do this. At 1:55, she gathered her materials and walked to the executive conference room. The space was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 20, abstract art that probably cost more than her annual salary. David was already there, along with 2 of the VPs. The third arrived moments after Lauren, apologizing for being late. No problem, David said. Lauren, whenever you're ready. She pulled up her presentation, took a breath, and began. Thank you for your time today. I want to talk about an opportunity we're missing in our client acquisition strategy and how we can address it with a relatively modest reallocation of resources. The first slide appeared on the screen, her client retention analysis, the graphs she'd built, the data that told a story about efficiency and value. Over the past 3 years, we've been allocating roughly 40% of our acquisition budget to trade show presence. But when we segment our client retention by acquisition channel, we see something interesting. She walked them through it, building the case piece by piece, the data, the implications, the proposed solution. She fielded questions, anticipated objections, demonstrated that she'd thought through the implementation challenges. 20 minutes later, she reached her final slide. In summary, a 30% shift in budget allocation focused on direct outreach to target accounts with maintained presence at our 3 highest value trade shows. Estimated ROI improvement of 12 to 15% within the first year, with compounding benefits as we build relationships with high retention clients. Happy to answer any questions. The VPs looked at each other. David looked at his notes. The silence stretched. Finally, one of the VPs, Sarah Chen, who ran operations, leaned forward. This is impressive work. Really impressive. Have you validated these retention numbers with finance? I have. The data comes from their client lifetime value analysis, which I cross-referenced with our acquisition channel tracking. And the case studies? Those are real companies? They are. I've included citations and contact information if you want to verify. 2 of them are in similar industries to our target market. More questions, more answers. Lauren felt herself settling into the rhythm of it, the back and forth of professional discourse. This was what she was good at, synthesizing information, seeing patterns, communicating clearly. She'd just never had the opportunity to demonstrate it before, or rather, she'd had the opportunity, but Vanessa had taken it. Finally, Sarah sat back. I'm sold. David, what's your timeline on implementing this? That's what I wanted to discuss, David said. Lauren, how quickly could you put together a full implementation plan? Specific budget numbers, timeline, resource allocation? 2 weeks, Lauren said. Maybe less. Let's say 2 weeks to be safe. David made a note. We'll reconvene then with finance and marketing in the room. If the numbers hold up, I think we should move on this for Q2. One of the other VPs nodded. Agreed. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need to be doing. The meeting adjourned. Lauren gathered her materials, feeling the adrenaline drain away and leave her slightly shaky. She'd done it. She'd presented her work, defended her ideas, impressed the people who mattered. David caught her at the door. That was excellent, Lauren. Really excellent. I meant what I said earlier. This is the kind of work that leads to advancement. Keep it up. Thank you. I will. She walked back to her desk, feeling lighter than she had in days. Weeks. Years, maybe. The office hummed around her. interrupting the usual midday chaos of phones and conversations and the eternal background noise of productivity. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. "Hey, can we talk? Something happened with my Wang application." Lauren stared at the message. This was it. The moment when consequences arrived. When Vanessa would learn that her references hadn't been quite as glowing as she'd expected. She typed back, "Sure. Coffee in 10? The response came immediately. "Yes, thanks." Lauren stood, smoothed her blazer, and headed to the coffee shop. Vanessa was already at Bluebird when Lauren arrived, sitting at a corner table with an untouched latte in front of her. Her usual composure had cracked. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw tight, her perfectly maintained exterior showing stress fractures. Lauren ordered her coffee and sat down. "What happened?" "I got rejected." Vanessa's voice was flat, controlled in that way that suggested she was working very hard to keep it that way. "Wang and Associates called this morning. They said they were going with another candidate, thanked me for my time, the usual professional brush-off." "I'm sorry," Lauren said, and meant it, at least partially. She'd wanted Vanessa to face consequences, but she hadn't wanted to enjoy watching her hurt. "They gave me feedback," Vanessa continued, still in that flat voice, "which they usually don't do, but I asked, and the HR person was weirdly willing to share. She said my interviews were strong, my experience was solid, but they had some concerns about my collaboration style and my approach to team attribution." The words hung between them. Lauren sipped her coffee, saying nothing. "Any team attribution," Vanessa repeated. That's a very specific thing to flag, and the only way they'd know to ask about that is if someone mentioned it in a reference. "References are supposed to give honest feedback," Lauren said carefully. "Honest?" Vanessa's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone sabotaged my application." "Did they say who raised concerns?" "No. References are confidential. But I can do math, Lauren?" Vanessa leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I asked 4 people to be references. You, Claire, James, and David. David loves me. There's no way he gave me a bad reference, which means it was one of you 3, or all of you 3. "I answered their questions honestly," Lauren said. "Oh, that's what references are supposed to do." "Honestly?" Vanessa's eyes were bright now, angry or hurt or both. "What exactly did you tell them?" "I told them about your strengths, your client-facing skills, your presentation abilities. I also told them to talk to your other references about your internal collaboration." "You threw me under the bus." "I gave them complete information." Lauren kept her voice level. "That's not the same thing." "Bullshit." The word came out harsh, cutting. "You knew what would happen. You suggested I ask Claire and James specifically, knowing they'd—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" The question was so genuinely baffled that Lauren almost laughed. Vanessa didn't know, had no idea, couldn't see the pattern of her own behavior because from her perspective, everything she'd done was justified. Taking credit for work? That was just effective self-promotion. Marginalizing colleagues? That was just competitive drive. Using people as stepping stones? That was just ambition. "You asked me to be a reference," Lauren said. "I gave you one, an honest one. If that's a problem, maybe the issue isn't with the reference." "Don't," Vanessa's voice shook. "Don't you dare pretend this is about honesty or integrity or whatever moral high ground you're claiming. This is about you sabotaging my career because... Why? Because you're jealous? Because you're bitter that I'm better at this than you are?" The accusation should have stung. In her first life, it would have devastated her, sent her spiraling into self-doubt and recrimination. But she'd lived through that already. I had survived the version of this conversation where she'd apologized, where she'd internalized Vanessa's criticisms, where she'd believed that success meant being more like Vanessa and less like herself. "I'm not jealous," Lauren said quietly, "and I didn't sabotage you. I just didn't protect you from the consequences of your own choices." "My choices." Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? Forget it. Forget this whole conversation. I thought we were friends, or at least professional colleagues, but apparently I was wrong about you." She left, and Lauren sat alone with her coffee, watching through the window as Vanessa stalked down the sidewalk, her posture rigid with anger and hurt. Her phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Heard Vanessa didn't get the Wang job. You okay?" Another from James. "Whatever happened with Vanessa's application, I hope it was worth it." Lauren didn't respond to either. She finished her coffee, threw away the cup, and walked back to the office. The afternoon passed slowly. Lauren worked on her implementation plan, sent emails, attended a meeting about Q2 projections, normal work things, but the atmosphere in the office had changed. People were whispering, glancing at Vanessa's desk, clearly aware that something had happened. By 4 p.m., Vanessa's desk was empty. Her computer was off, her personal items gone. Lauren felt a spike of alarm. Surely Vanessa hadn't quit? Hadn't been fired? She pulled up her email and found a message from David, sent to the entire department. Subject, Team Update Team. I want to let you know that Vanessa Park has submitted her resignation, now effective immediately. She's accepted a position at another firm and will be transitioning out today. Please join me in wishing her well in her future endeavors. We'll be discussing coverage for her accounts and projects in tomorrow's team meeting. Best. David Lauren read the message 3 times, trying to process what it meant. Vanessa had quit. Immediately. Without the usual 2 weeks' notice, without a transition period, which suggested either she had another offer already lined up, or she was so angry about the Wang rejection that she'd decided to burn bridges. She pulled up Vanessa's social media, feeling slightly guilty about checking, but doing it anyway. There it was, posted 20 minutes ago. Excited to announce that I'm starting a new chapter, joining Strategic Partners International as Director of Client Relations. Sometimes the best opportunities come when others close. Grateful for everyone who supported me along the way. Strategic Partners International. A smaller firm, not as prestigious as Wang & Associates, but respectable. And the timeline suggested Vanessa had been interviewing elsewhere already, had this as a backup option, which meant the Wang rejection, while painful, hadn't actually derailed her career. Lauren sat back, feeling something complicated settling in her chest. Relief? Disappointment? She'd wanted Vanessa to face consequences, but she'd also wanted... what? For Vanessa to learn something? To change? To acknowledge the harm she'd caused? That was never going to happen. People like Vanessa didn't do self-reflection. They did self-promotion and moved on. Her phone buzzed. Her grandmother calling instead of texting. Wei? Nai, hi, is everything okay? Everything is fine. I wanted to ask you about the Hongxiao roux. Did you try making it? Not yet. I was going to this weekend. Good. Remember, the pork needs to be blanched first, or it will be too greasy. And don't skip the rock sugar. It makes the sauce glossy. I won't skip it. Also, your mother called me. She says you've been calling more, visiting more. I told her you're probably sick because healthy young people don't visit their old grandmothers this much. Lauren smiled despite herself. I'm not sick. I just realized I was taking you for granted. Her grandmother's tone suggested skepticism, but also pleasure. Well, keep being sick then. It's good for both of us. They talked for another 10 minutes about nothing in particular. The weather, the neighbor's cat, the price of vegetables at the market. Normal conversation, grounding and real. When she hung up, Lauren turned back to her computer and pulled up her implementation plan. 2 weeks until the next presentation. 2 weeks to prove that she deserved the opportunities she'd been denied in her first life. 2 weeks to build something better than revenge. Spring arrived gradually, the way it always did in the city. A slow thawing, the trees along the corporate plaza beginning to bud, the morning air losing its bitter edge. Lauren marked the passage of time in presentations, in metrics that steadily improved, in the growing recognition that she was more than just a reliable worker bee. Her direct outreach program launched in April. By May, they had their first major client signed through the new process, a healthcare technology company with a 7-figure contract value. By June, the retention numbers were tracking even better than she'd projected. David promoted her to senior manager in July, with a salary increase and a window office and the kind of corporate language about strategic value that actually meant something this time. You've really come into your own, he told her during the promotion meeting. I'll be honest, I didn't see this coming. You were always competent, but this past few months you've been exceptional. What changed? Everything. Lauren thought. I died and came back and decided to stop being afraid. I just started focusing on impact instead of activity, she said instead, on being strategic instead of just responsive. Well, keep it up. We've got big plans for Q3 and I want you leading the charge. Lauren walked out of his office feeling the weight of success, the strange satisfaction of getting what you'd worked for, but also a kind of hollowness. Because in her first life, This had been Vanessa's trajectory, Vanessa's promotion, Vanessa's window office. Lauren had just taken it for herself. Was that justice or theft? Karma or karma manipulation? She didn't have an answer. Vanessa's departure had created ripples that were still settling. Her old accounts had been redistributed, her projects reassigned. Some of them had landed on Lauren's desk. Natural, given her new role. Some had gone to other team members. One had imploded spectacularly when the client discovered that Vanessa's promised deliverables were 3 weeks behind schedule and only 30% complete. David had apologized personally, had offered a discount on future work, had ultimately salvaged the relationship through sheer force of professional charm and genuinely good account management. "She left us in a tough spot," he'd said during a team meeting, his tone neutral, but his frustration visible. "Let's learn from this. When someone leaves, we need better transition protocols." No one mentioned that the tough spot was because Vanessa had been better at looking productive than being productive, better at presenting progress than making progress. But everyone knew. Lauren had gotten an email from Vanessa in June. Short, professional, slightly cold. Subject, LinkedIn recommendation. "Lauren, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I'm working on updating my LinkedIn profile and was hoping you might be willing to write a recommendation for our time working together. I'd be happy to reciprocate." Best, Vanessa Lauren had stared at the email for a full minute, parsing the layers of audacity and genuine obliviousness. Vanessa wanted a recommendation. From Lauren? After everything. She'd written back, "Vanessa, I don't think I'm the right person to write you a LinkedIn recommendation. I'd suggest asking colleagues who worked more closely with you on your key projects. Best of luck in your new role." Lauren Vanessa hadn't responded. Her LinkedIn profile remained unrecommended by Lauren, though she'd apparently gotten several other colleagues to write glowing testimonials about her innovative approach and collaborative spirit. Some things never changed. August brought a heat wave and a new challenge. David was being promoted to SVP, which meant someone would need to take over the Strategic Partnerships Department. The decision would come from the executive team, but David's recommendation would carry significant weight. Lauren knew this because she'd lived it before. In her first life, they'd brought in an external hire, someone with an Ivy League MBA and experience at a prestigious consulting firm. Someone who'd been perfectly competent but disconnected from the team, who'd made strategic decisions without understanding the operational reality. Lauren had lasted 8 months under that management before accepting a lateral move to a different department. It had been the beginning of her professional stagnation, the slow drift into irrelevance. She wasn't going to let that happen again. David?" she said, catching him after a meeting. "Do you have a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I wanted to talk about the department head position. I know the decision isn't final yet, but I wanted to make sure you know that I'm interested." David looked surprised. "Really? I wasn't sure if management was your path. You've always seemed more focused on the strategic work itself." "I am focused on the strategic work," Lauren said, "but I also think I understand this department better than most external candidates would. I know our clients, our processes, our team dynamics, and I have ideas about where we should be heading." Such as? She'd prepared for this, had spent weeks thinking about how to pitch her vision, how to position herself as the logical choice, such as expanding our direct outreach model into the mid-market sector. "We've been focusing on enterprise clients, but there's a huge opportunity in companies with 50 to 200 employees. They need strategic partnerships but can't afford the big consultancies. We could own that market." David was nodding slowly. "That's interesting. What else?" "Internal development. We're not investing enough in training our team on advanced partnership structures. Most of our people came up through sales, which is great for relationship building, but limits our ability to structure complex deals. I'd want to implement a quarterly training program, bring in external experts, build our capabilities." "And you'd be willing to move away from the client-facing work to do the management side?" "I think good management is still strategic work," Lauren said, "just at a different level. And honestly, David, I've watched what happens when we bring in external managers who don't understand our culture. It doesn't serve the team, and it doesn't serve our clients." "Fair point." David glanced at his watch. "Look, I can't make any promises. The decision isn't just mine. But I appreciate you putting your name in the hat. Put together a formal proposal, vision, priorities, how you'd approach the role. I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Thank you. I'll have it to you by Friday. She walked back to her desk, feeling the familiar combination of excitement and terror. This was it. The moment that would determine the next phase of her career, her trajectory, her ability to build something meaningful. She pulled up a blank document and started typing. Her grandmother called that evening while Lauren was still working on the proposal, sitting at her small kitchen table with her laptop and a half-eaten dinner of leftover hongxiao roux that actually tasted pretty close to the original. Wen, are you eating? I am, Nai. I'm eating the pork I made using your recipe. Good. You need to eat. You work too much? I know, but this is important. Work is always important, until it isn't. Her grandmother's tone shifted slightly. Your mother told me you got a promotion. She's very proud. I'm proud too, Lauren said. It's been a good year. Good year for work. But what about the rest? You have a boyfriend, girlfriend, anything? Lauren smiled. Not at the moment. I've been focused on my career. Career, always career. Career doesn't keep you warm at night. Career doesn't give you grandchildren. I'm not getting any younger, you know. I know. Oh, Nai. Although, her grandmother continued, better to be alone and successful than married to the wrong person. Your second aunt, her marriage is terrible, but she won't leave because she's afraid of being alone. Very sad. I won't marry the wrong person, Lauren promised. Good. Be picky. Be very picky. Too many young people rush into things because they think they're running out of time. But time only runs out when you die. Until then, you have time. They talked for another 20 minutes. When Lauren hung up, she felt grounded in a way she hadn't expected. Her grandmother was right. She'd been so focused on rewriting her career that she'd barely thought about the rest of her life. In her first timeline, she dated occasionally, had a few relationships that had fizzled out due to mutual disinterest or incompatible life goals. By her late 30s, she'd been more or less resigned to being single, had convinced herself that she was fine with it. But now, she was in her early 30s again, with knowledge of what that resignation felt like, what it was like to realize you'd let the years slip by without really trying. She made a mental note. Focus on career now, but don't forget to build a life outside of work. Don't let success become its own form of isolation. Small changes, accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life. The proposal took her 3 days to complete. She refined it obsessively, had Claire review it. Claire had given notice but was still around for another week, incorporated feedback, refined it again. By Friday afternoon, she had something she was proud of. A clear vision for the department, concrete priorities, measurable goals. She sent it to David at 4 p.m. with a simple message. As requested, happy to discuss. His response came 30 minutes later. This is excellent. Forwarding to the executive team now. And then the waiting began. Lauren tried to focus on other work, on the daily tasks and client meetings and administrative minutiae that filled her calendar. But her mind kept drifting to the proposal, to the possibility of actually leading the department, of building something that reflected her values and her vision. Monday came and went. Tuesday, Wednesday. On Thursday, David called her into his office. Close the door, he said, which could mean anything. Lauren closed it and sat down, trying to read his expression. Neutral, professional, giving nothing away. The executive team made a decision about the department head position, he said. Lauren's pulse jumped. And they want to interview 3 finalists. You're one of them. He smiled. Along with 2 external candidates, the interviews are next week. I'll send you the details. But Lauren, I want you to know that I put in a strong recommendation for you. You've earned this opportunity. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but she didn't have better ones. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Just be yourself in the interview. You know this department better than anyone. Trust that. She walked out of his office feeling like she was floating. One of 3 finalists. A real shot at the position, at the future she'd envisioned, at rewriting her story completely. The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. in the main executive conference room. Lauren arrived 15 minutes early, carrying a leather portfolio that contained her presentation materials and absolutely nothing else. She'd learned from her grandmother that sometimes less was more, that confidence came from preparation, not props. The interview panel consisted of 3 people: the CEO, whom Lauren had met exactly twice in her years at the company, the COO, who had a reputation for asking impossible questions, and the head of HR, who smiled pleasantly and radiated the kind of professional warmth that made you want to confess things you hadn't done. "Lauren, thanks for joining us," the CEO said. "We've reviewed your proposal and David's recommendation. Now we'd like to hear directly from you about why you think you're the right person to lead strategic partnerships." She'd rehearsed this, had practiced in front of her bathroom mirror, they had recorded herself and played it back, had refined her talking points until they felt natural instead of scripted. "I think I'm the right person for 3 reasons," she said, keeping her voice steady and confident. "First, I understand this department's culture and capabilities better than any external candidate could. I've worked here for 4 years. I know our clients, I know our processes, I know where we excel and where we struggle." The COO nodded. "And the second reason?" "Second, I have a clear vision for where we should be heading. The direct outreach program I developed has proven that we can innovate and drive results. I want to extend that same strategic thinking to every aspect of how we operate, from client acquisition to talent development to partnership structuring." "And third?" the HR director asked. "Third, I'm invested in this team's success in a way that goes beyond quarterly metrics. I care about developing our people, building a culture where talent is recognized and rewarded, creating systems that support collaboration rather than competition." The subtle dig at Vanessa's approach, the implicit promise that Lauren would be different, not showy or self-promotional, but genuinely focused on collective success. The CEO leaned forward. "Let's talk about that culture piece. You mentioned collaboration over competition, but this is a competitive industry. How do you balance encouraging collaboration while still driving individual excellence?" "I don't think they're mutually exclusive," Lauren said. "In my experience, the best results come from teams where people feel secure enough to share ideas without worrying about credit stealing, where the system rewards contribution rather than self-promotion. That requires setting clear expectations, creating transparent metrics, and making sure recognition is tied to actual impact rather than just visibility." Another subtle reference to Vanessa. The COO's eyes sharpened slightly. She'd caught it. "Give me an example," the COO said. "A time when you had to address a situation where someone wasn't being collaborative." This was the trap question, the one designed to see if she'd throw people under the bus, if she'd gossip or name names or demonstrate the exact behavior she'd just criticized. "I can think of several instances," Lauren said carefully, "but I think the most instructive one was early in my tenure here, when I saw someone taking credit for a colleague's work in a client presentation. I didn't address it in the moment. I was junior and I wasn't sure it was my place, but I've thought about that decision a lot, and I realize now that staying silent was the wrong choice." "What would you do differently?" the HR director asked. "I'd address it directly but privately, pull the person aside after the meeting, ask them about the attribution, give them a chance to correct it themselves. If they didn't, I'd escalate to management, not as punishment, but as feedback. This behavior undermines team trust, and it needs to stop." "And if you were the manager in that situation?" the CEO asked. "I'd document it, address it clearly with the individual, and make sure it was part of their performance review. I'd also examine our systems to understand how someone could get away with that behavior in the first place. What are we rewarding? What are we measuring? Are our incentives aligned with our stated values?" The questions continued for another 30 minutes. They asked about her mid-market expansion idea, her training program proposal, her approach to conflict resolution and change management, and budget allocation. She answered each one with the same combination of confidence and thoughtfulness, drawing on both her preparation and her 5 years of future experience. Finally, the CEO sat back. "Lauren, that was impressive. Really impressive. We have 2 more candidates to interview, and then we'll make a decision. You should hear from us by end of week." "Thank you for the opportunity," Lauren said. "Regardless of the outcome, I'm grateful you considered me." She walked out of the conference room feeling simultaneously exhausted and energized. She'd done well. She knew she'd done well. Whether it would be enough, that was out of her control now. The week crawled by. Lauren tried to focus on work, on her existing projects and client relationships, and the daily grind of professional life. But her mind kept circling back to the interview, analyzing every answer, second-guessing every word choice. Wednesday afternoon, her phone rang. Internal number. David. "Lauren, can you come to my office?" Her pulse spiked. "Sure. Give me 5 minutes." "Actually, can you come now?" Now, which meant either really good news or really bad news, nothing in between. She walked to his office, her heart pounding. David was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He turned when she entered. "Close the door," he said. She did. The executive team made their decision. His expression was unreadable. "They want to offer you the position." The words didn't quite register. Lauren heard them, processed them, but they felt unreal. Impossible. What? The department head role, it's yours if you want it, pending final approval from the board, but that's just a formality. David smiled, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him during this whole process. "Congratulations, Lauren. You earned this." Thank you. Yes, I want it." She felt slightly dizzy, unmoored. "When do I start?" "Officially, September 1st, when my promotion takes effect. But we can start the transition earlier if you want to shadow me. Get familiar with the additional responsibilities." "September 1st. 2 weeks away." "I'd like that," she said. "The transition period, I mean. I want to do this right." "I know you will." David extended his hand, and she shook it. "This is going to be good for the department, good for the company, and good for you." Lauren walked back to her desk in a daze. She sat down, stared at her computer screen, tried to process what had just happened. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Had rewritten her career trajectory, had claimed the role that should have been hers all along, had proven that she was more than just reliable, more than just steady, more than just Vanessa Park's supporting player. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Your grandmother says you're working too hard. She wants you to come for dinner this weekend." Another buzz. "Claire, heard through the grapevine that you got the department head role. Well deserved. Kick ass and take names." Another. James. "Congratulations on the promotion." Maybe now we can actually do that vendor integration project the right way?" Lauren smiled, feeling something settle in her chest. Not quite contentment. It was too early for that. Too much work ahead. But satisfaction, a sense that she'd made choices that aligned with her values, that she'd stood up for herself and for the principles she believed in, that she'd stopped being afraid. She pulled up her calendar and started planning the transition, the meetings she'd need to schedule, the conversations she'd need to have. There was so much to do, so much to learn, so much responsibility ahead, but for the first time in 2 timelines, she felt ready for it. Saturday evening, she stood in her grandmother's kitchen, helping prepare dinner for her extended family. Aunts and uncles and cousins she hadn't seen in months. They gathered around the small apartment, talking and laughing and filling the space with noise and warmth. Her grandmother moved through it all like a conductor, directing the flow of food and conversation, making sure everyone had enough to eat and plenty to say. "Wen got promoted," she announced during dinner, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Big job, managing many people." A chorus of congratulations, questions about the work, the salary, the responsibilities. Lauren answered them patiently, trying to explain strategic partnerships to relatives who worked in restaurants and dry cleaners and medical offices. "So you help companies work together?" her second aunt asked. "Basically, yes." "And they pay you how much for this?" Lauren named a number, and the table went quiet. "Yeah," her grandmother said finally. "That's too much." "Yeah, no wonder you're always working." Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on. But later, when Lauren was helping wash dishes, her grandmother pulled her aside. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "Your grandfather would be proud too." "Thank you, Nai. But remember what I said about balance. Success at work is good, but don't forget the rest of life. Don't forget family. Don't forget to find someone to share things with." "I won't forget," Lauren promised. Her grandmother studied her face, then nodded. "Good. Now finish these dishes. Everyone is waiting for dessert." Lauren dried the plates and bowls, listening to the sound of her family in the next room. This moment, this exact configuration of people and food and casual conversation would never happen again. Time only moved in one direction. Oh, even when it looped back on itself. But she was here now, present, paying attention, storing memories instead of letting them slip be unnoticed. Small changes accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life. 3 years later, Lauren stood in front of the Strategic Partnerships Department at their annual offsite, presenting the results of a year that had exceeded every metric they'd set. Client retention, up 34%, revenue growth, up 41%, employee satisfaction scores, highest in the company. We did this together, she told the team, not through competition, not through individual heroics, but through actual collaboration, through sharing credit, supporting each other's work, building something bigger than any one person. Applause. Real applause. Not the polite corporate kind, but genuine appreciation. After the presentation, Lauren stepped outside for air. The offsite venue was in wine country, all rolling hills and late summer sunshine. She found a quiet spot on the terrace, pulled out her phone, and scrolled through her messages. One from David, now the company's COO. Excellent presentation. You've built something special with that team. One from Claire, who is now a VP at Thompson Associates, and someone Lauren met for quarterly drinks. Saw your revenue numbers. Crushing it. Drinks next week. One from James, who had joined Lauren's team 6 months ago and was thriving in his new role. Thanks for the shout out in the presentation. Means a lot. And one from her grandmother. Your mother says you have a boyfriend now? When do I meet him? Lauren smiled. The boyfriend was Marcus. Yes, that Marcus. The one who'd briefly done cryptocurrency podcasting and pet grooming before finding his actual calling in nonprofit management. They'd reconnected at a mutual friend's wedding, had been surprised to discover they had actual chemistry when they weren't just co-workers, had been dating for 8 months now. It was good. Not perfect. Nothing was perfect, but good in all the ways that mattered. She typed back, "Next weekend, be nice to him." Her grandmother's response came immediately. "I'm always nice. You be nice to him." Lauren laughed and pocketed her phone. The sun was starting to set, painting the hills in shades of gold and amber. Her team was inside, celebrating their success, building relationships that would carry them through the next challenge and the one after that. This was it. This was the life she'd built the second time around. And not perfect, not without regrets or complications or difficult choices, but honest, intentional, hers. She thought about Vanessa sometimes, wondered if she was still at Strategic Partners International, if she'd learned anything from the Wang rejection, if she'd ever recognized the pattern of her own behavior. Probably not. People usually didn't. But that wasn't Lauren's problem anymore. She'd told the truth, faced the consequences, moved forward. That was all anyone could do. Her phone buzzed one more time. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Lauren Chen. Miss Chen, this is Patricia Wong from Wong & Associates. I'm not sure if you remember me. I contacted you about a reference for Vanessa Park a few years ago. Lauren's pulse jumped. Oh, I remember. I'm calling because we have a position opening up that I think might interest you. Director of Strategic Alliances, leading our new partnerships division. The role would involve... Patricia outlined the opportunity. It was impressive. Bigger scope than Lauren's current role, better compensation, a chance to work with Fortune 500 clients on the kind of complex partnership structures that she'd only begun to explore in her current position. In her first life, she would have said yes immediately, would have jumped at the chance to advance, to climb higher, to prove herself. Now, she listened politely and said, "Can I think about it? I'd need to review the details and consider the impact on my current commitments." Of course. I'll send over the full job description and we can schedule a conversation for next week if you're interested. That works. Thank you for thinking of me. She hung up and stared at the sunset, turning the offer over in her mind. More money, more prestige, more opportunity, but also a new company, a new team, starting over with building trust and credibility and relationships. Leaving behind the department she'd spent 3 years developing, the people she'd invested in, the culture she'd carefully cultivated. Was it worth it? She pulled up her contacts and called David. "Lauren, how's the offsite?" "Good. Great, actually. Listen, I just got a call from Wang & Associates about a position there." A pause. "Are you thinking of taking it?" "I don't know. That's why I'm calling. What would you do?" David was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I'd think very carefully about what you want from your career. Is it always the next rung up the ladder, or is it building something meaningful where you are? There's no wrong answer, but they lead to different lives." "That's not very helpful." Lauren said, smiling. I know, but Lauren, whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice. Not what you think you should want, not what looks good on paper. Your actual choice. They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. Lauren sat on the terrace as the sun disappeared below the hills, thinking about choices and trajectories and the strange gift of getting to live your life twice. In the end, the decision wasn't that hard. She called Patricia Wong back the next day and politely declined. The department she'd built, the team she'd developed, the relationships she'd invested in, that was worth more than a title upgrade and a bigger salary. That was the difference between the first timeline and this one, understanding what actually mattered. 5 years after that decision, Lauren sat in her grandmother's hospital room, holding her hand while machines beeped quietly in the background. Her grandmother was 91 now, fading gently into the kind of sleep that would eventually become permanent. But she'd had 5 more years than she'd had in the first timeline. 5 years of weekly phone calls and monthly visits and cooking lessons that had turned into a family tradition. 5 years of being present, of paying attention, of not being too busy for what mattered. Her grandmother's eyes opened slightly. When? I'm here, Nai. Good. A faint smile. You brought Marcus? He's getting coffee. He'll be back soon. Good boy. You should marry him. We're engaged, Nai. I told you last week. Oh, I forgot. Another smile. My memory is going. But some things I remember. I remember you used to be so worried all the time. About work, about money, about being good enough. Now you're calmer. Happier. I learned from you, Lauren said, about what matters. What matters is family, love, being present. The rest is just details. Her grandmother's grip tightened slightly. You learned that? I'm proud. Thank you, Nai. They sat in silence, hand in hand, while the machines beeped and the hospital hummed with its eternal activity. Outside the window, the city continued its relentless motion, indifferent to individual dramas, to lives beginning and ending and beginning again. Her grandmother fell asleep. Lauren stayed holding her hand, memorizing the moment. This was it. This was what the second chance had been for. Not revenge, not career success, not correcting every mistake or optimizing every choice. Just this. Being present for the people who mattered. Paying attention, storing memories instead of taking them for granted. Small changes, accumulating. That's how you rewrote a life. And when her grandmother passed 2 weeks later, peacefully and surrounded by family, Lauren mourned. But she didn't have regrets. She'd used her second chance wisely, had been there when it mattered, had said the things that needed saying. That was all anyone could ask for. That was enough. 10 years after the rebirth, Lauren sat in her office, still at the same company, out now as VP of Strategic Partnerships, reviewing applications for a new hire. The resume on top of the stack caught her attention. Vanessa Park. She stared at the name, feeling the echo of old anger, old hurt, old choices. Vanessa had applied for a senior manager position on Lauren's team. The resume was impressive. 10 years of experience, mostly at mid-tier firms. Good results, solid references, nothing exceptional, but nothing concerning either. Lauren could reject the application, could let Vanessa's past behavior disqualify her, could exercise the kind of quiet power that came with being in a position to make hiring decisions. Or she could interview her, could evaluate her objectively, could see if 10 years had changed her the way 10 years had changed everyone. She picked up the phone and called HR. Let's bring Vanessa Park in for an interview, she said. I want to see what she's learned. Because that was the thing about second chances. Everyone deserved them. Even the people who'd hurt you. Not because they'd earned it, but because forgiveness was easier than carrying anger. Because growth was possible for everyone, not just for you. Because small changes accumulated. And who knew what Vanessa might have learned in a decade? The interview would be interesting, if nothing else. Lauren smiled and returned to work, grateful for the chance to find out.